Hey all, and welcome to another ultra detailed tutorial. This is one of the biggest projects I've done so far, and it has certainly taken me the longest to complete. So sit back and enjoy the journey while this 20-story high-rise apartment building comes to life. The name of this kit is Majestic Towers from Custom Model Railroads, and this model certainly lives up to its name. The kit is roughly modelled from the Majestic building in New York, with amazing views across Central Park. This is by no means a small kit. It's heavy and the price tag is high, but it's a beautiful kit and looks fantastic once finished. It's an acrylic kit, which means you'll want to carefully read the instructions. It's full of tips to get the best results when building with acrylic. In total there are 7 units, and they all go together pretty much the same way. So I'll demonstrate the first unit, and the process is simply repeated for the rest of the model. Ordinary glue won't work with this model. You'll need a glue like Weldon 3 that's specifically designed for acrylic. Using an applicator bottle with a needle point is also very handy to have. Other necessities for completing this kit are fillers like squadron white or green putty, and a range of pliers, knives, cutters, as well as a set of jeweler's files, sandpaper, and squares to ensure everything is plumb. Now we're ready to start assembly. Even though this may seem tedious, before I start gluing, I first separate all the parts into their specific units. That way I know everything is there and nothing is missing. It will also speed up the build process because I won't be ruffling through a big pile of acrylic looking for each part as I need it. Everything for that specific unit will be conveniently together. Each unit is put into a separate bag, ready to be assembled. Building is very straightforward. The instructions are very detailed and it all slots together easily. I make sure to dry fit each piece before gluing to make sure it fits properly. You may find some tabs need some light filing to get a good fit. Also, if you're gluing this together on your cutting mat, just be aware any spilt glue will remove the markings on the mat, so you may want to flip it over. This particular glue has a very noxious odour, so make sure to work in a well ventilated area and use a fan to help direct any fumes away from your face. With the parts in place, run a line of glue along the inside edge. The glue is very thin and will wick along, filling the gaps between the two parts. It only takes about 30 seconds for the parts to adhere to each other, and then we can move on. The wall detail is added next, and may need a light sanding to remove the small burr. It's glued in this same way by holding the part in position on the model and applying a small drop of glue at each end. For the larger details, you might find it easier to use a small brush dipped in the glue. That way you can very precisely apply glue along the length of the part. If you accidentally apply too much glue and it bubbles at the join, just wait a minute for the glue to begin to set, and then gently scrape away the excess. On some of the corners there is some end detail. To have the detail seamlessly wrap around the corner of the building, a triangular file was used to carve in the groove. Also, for unwanted gaps like this, you'll need some of the squadron putty to fill the gap. Once the gap has been filled, lightly sand away the excess putty. To prepare the parts for painting, the unit is washed in a mildly soapy water to remove grease, grime, and any dust that has built up as we assembled the unit. After it has been washed, it gets a rinse under the tap and is dried. Because this is going to be illuminated from the inside, we need to paint the inside walls black. This layer acts as a light block and prevents the walls from glowing when the interior lights are added. The same is done for the back of the window frame inserts, and they are painted with Rust-Oleum Satin Ivory as their final colour. The satin ivory is also used as an undercoat for the main unit as well. Once that layer has had time to dry, Rust-Oleum Camouflage Khaki was used as the base colour for the building. After everything has had time to dry, the window frames are glued into the unit with Super Tack glue, making sure to get them centered. Now the process we just completed is repeated for the rest of the units. I spent at least a few nights putting this model together, doing my best not to rush things. It's very easy to make a mistake and put something on upside down or backwards, so just be patient and take your time. It was a lot of fun slowly seeing it all come together. These kits are not difficult to put together, it just takes time and careful planning. With the right tools, even a beginner would have no trouble assembling this kit, and the well-written instructions certainly help a lot. I'm planning on adding a grimy wash over the model, so to help prevent it being too dark after the wash has been applied, I lighten the model by misting some off-white over the surface of the walls. It only needs a light coat, and once the wash has been applied, the overall colour will return to the original khaki colour with some nice weathered effects. The wash I'm using is a combination of MIG oil brusher grime diluted with enamel thinners. The oil paint is dabbed over a small section of the wall, and a medium bristle fan brush is dipped in the thinners and used to spread the oil paint across the surface. The oil paint spreads out very effortlessly, and I allow some slightly heavier and lighter spots to remain, adding some colour variation across the wall. Finally, a sponge is stippled over the area to remove any brush strokes. Any paint in unwanted areas is removed with a brush dipped in thinners. You can see here how the wash darkens the walls compared to the unit on top. Now for all the added detail. Hundreds of 3D printed details were created and printed for both the exterior and interior of the building. Every single detail was printed using the Alphen Resin 3D printer from Nova 3D. This 3D printer has become my go-to printer simply because it's easy to use and the results are amazing. Like with any new tool, there is a learning curve, and working with resin 3D printers is no exception. But as you'll see for scale modelling, especially for HO scale or smaller, resin printers are almost a necessity when it comes to making your own custom details. Once the print has been washed and cured, it can be treated like most other plastic models. The supports are cut away and any imperfections are cleaned. To make painting these tiny details a little easier, I drilled small holes in each item in a spot not visible to the viewer. That way, wire can be used as a mount to hold while painting. Most of the interior detail will be hard to see, so I don't spend too much time painting them. Each detail is undercoated with flat white. And then using the airbrush, I paint each piece of furniture. Interior rooms are fashioned with styrene sheet. Nothing too fancy, just something to sell the illusion. However, I did spend a bit of extra time on the lobby of the apartment building compared to the rest of the other rooms. The interior wall structure was a little more complex, and there is a lot more furniture here as well. If you're wondering what this tool is, it's called a Wonder Cutter. Basically an ultrasonic knife, and it glides through this acrylic sheet like butter. It does, however, tend to leave a raised edge, so for detail work you'll need to do a bit of cleanup after using the knife on plastic. After painting the room, some floor and wall details like carpets and framed pictures are scaled accordingly and printed. They can be attached with some white glue for even more intricate detail inside our lobby. All the furniture items are glued in the same way. We can't have a lobby with no people, so some Woodland Scenics HO scale passengers will soon have a new home inside our apartment. The Woodland Scenics figures are not too bad, but they don't really have any faces. So here's my attempt at painting the world's smallest eyes. To save me from insanity, I only attempted to do this on one figure. The kit also comes with plenty of window glazing. This is cut into strips and glued with super tack glue to the backs of each window for every unit. Window shades are also added. The kit comes with shades, however I'm planning on using curtains for all of the other windows, which I'll show shortly. As for lighting, I'm using 12-volt LED strip lights. These are warm white LEDs and are cut into groups of 3. A styrene template was used to help position the holes for each light. Once you know the location of the strip, the holes are marked and drilled. The styrene is quite thin, so a hobby knife is more than sufficient to bore out the holes. The lights are wired together and glued onto the roof. The tape help holds the lights as the glue sets, but later you'll see I used hot glue instead as it dries a lot faster. The rest of the apartment rooms are constructed in the same way, using styrene for the walls and filling the room with furniture, carpets, and wall details like posters and doorways. The roofs have the holes drilled for the LEDs and get glued on. This is one of those repetitive steps. Making one room doesn't really take too long, but when you multiply that 22 times, it ends up being quite the challenge that took a couple of evenings to complete. They do look cool arranged like this, but alas, they will soon be hidden inside the building, only to be seen by inquisitive onlookers. To prevent glowing walls, the outer sections of each room is painted black, being careful to angle the spray in such a way that it doesn't paint the interior black as well. The intended position of each room is marked on the building interior wall. I number each location so I know where not to add curtains. Windows that don't specifically look into the detailed rooms have various styles of curtains added that will block the view to the inside areas of the building that I don't want to be seen. To make positioning the curtains much easier, I'm using the supplied window blinds as a template. The page is scanned into the computer and I used Photoshop to do the rest. The curtain designs are downloaded and scaled to fit over the windows. Once each of the blinds from the template is covered with one of our curtains, the template is removed and we are left with only the curtains ready to print. Doing it this way also allows me to delete windows that are not needed. Some windows have curtains that are half drawn. To help with the effect on the back of those particular curtains, I painted black over the area of the curtain. Using a makeshift light box like this makes doing this so much easier and faster. Each row is cut and glued into its respective position inside the building. To enable me to connect all the LEDs together, I'm using a somewhat unconventional method. I'm using an electronics breadboard and pins to plug all the lights into a common power source. We don't need the whole thing, just one of the power rails. Each unit will have its LEDs wired in parallel to one of these pin-headed terminals, which can then be used to plug into our power rail. Each room is loosely placed in position, so I can measure and cut each wire, ensuring it's an appropriate length so I can wire everything together. It's a lot easier than it seems. As long as you get the polarity correct and don't use a power source greater than 12 volts, you'll be fine. I'm actually using 9 volts to limit the brightness of the LEDs. The power rail is trimmed so it will fit inside the building. Just make sure to leave enough spots on the power rail for all the LEDs. It can be permanently glued to the inside wall. The rest of the LED lights are fixed to each room with some hot glue. Those rooms can also be hot glued to its allocated position inside each unit. The hot glue is surprisingly strong and does a great job of holding even the biggest rooms firmly in position inside the building. For the ambient background lighting behind the curtain windows, I create an internal structure that will hold the LEDs. The foam core is assembled and held with hot glue. The light strips get fixed to the internal structure. Each strip has an adhesive backing, however it's a tad unreliable, so more hot glue is used to give the LEDs a more reliable hold. The reason for the 2 strips as you see here is actually because I ran out of warm white LED strips, so I had to supplement them with some bright white strips as well. If I had enough of the warm white LED light strips, I would have simply used 1 strip along each edge. A quick test shows everything is working, however there is a problem. When I put the LEDs inside the unit to test, you can see there is a big colour difference between the ambient LEDs and the LEDs inside the detailed rooms. Thankfully, this was easily fixed by adding some yellow masking tape over the bright white LEDs to adjust their colour temperature. Also, some hot glue was used around the edge of the tape to ensure it doesn't slowly peel away over time. Now the colour match is much closer. With that done, I can permanently glue some bracing to hold the ambient LED lights in place. Now for a test of the complete wiring circuit. I don't want every single window in the building to be illuminated, so some windows have a black piece of styrene glued over the back of the window to completely black out that window from the ambient lighting. The entire building structure is glued together with polyurethane glue. A very small amount of this glue goes a very long way, and you don't need much at all. You really only need to apply it on the inside edge of the units, as the glue will expand and ooze out from any gaps towards the front if you're not careful. A very thin layer is applied and the 2 parts are pressed together. You have a good amount of working time with this glue, so be sure to take your time and carefully align the 2 sections. You'll also need to weigh down or clamp the pieces together, as this glue will expand and cause the parts to move if they are not held in position. I also used pegs to help hold areas of the model as well. If any areas need touch-up, you can decant some paint into a cup and apply it as needed. I used a bit too much glue here and some oozed out, leaving some shiny spots on the model. Now the rest of the exterior detail can be painted and added to the model. For some weathering, I applied an oil wash to most of the exterior details. This helps bring out some of the intricate detail of the 3D printed parts. Each of the details gets glued with super tack glue. There's no right or wrong way of doing this. Unless you're recreating an actual building, you can use your imagination to add some interest to your model. I really like how this area of the roof turned out, and the air vent ducts and pipes add so much interest to the building. I even created some pipes so they would go over the raised areas between the units, which breaks up the lines, making the whole model tie together really nicely. For weathering effects, I'm using some dark earth and concrete dust from the scale modeler's supply. With a bit of powder on the brush, I use it to add streaks from underneath the air vents and piping, as well as adding some streaks randomly around the building as well. Our last bit of detail to add are some balcony plants. Simply some fine leaf foliage or clump foliage in a pot that is added to the balcony. And of course, we have to have an out of control plant growing up the side of the building. Now for our final task. We need a way of turning the lights on and off. To make the switch blend in with the rest of the building, I'm using a small switch that is sanded just a bit to reduce its profile. And one of my 3D printed fuse boxes has a small area drilled in the back that will sit perfectly on top of the switch. With the hole cut into the wall and the switch mounted, the fuse box is hot glued on top, and we now have a hidden switch that will operate our lights. And that completes this mammoth project. It took 6 weeks to build and film this video, one of the most in-depth projects I've done so far, and it was certainly worth the effort. I really enjoy sitting back and looking at this model. If you enjoyed watching and want to help support the channel, be sure to subscribe and share these videos with others. Cheers, and thanks for watching.